Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to the qualifying report for the Russian Grand Prix. Now, come the race tomorrow, we've got a few drivers starting out of position, and so we could well be in for a decent Grand Prix. But before I talk too much about tomorrow, let's start by having a look at our pole sitter. And it is Valtteri Bottas who will be starting from the front of the grid for tomorrow's race, following, to be fair, a cracking lap in Q3, which saw off both his teammate and the Ferraris. His pole time, as you can see there, was a 1:31.387, and he will be starting tomorrow's Grand Prix on the ultra-soft tyre. I mean, in all honesty, it shouldn't really be a huge surprise that Bottas is strong, as he does tend to go very well in Russia, but it really is great to see him putting that car on pole, and although I'm sure he will be called upon to help Lewis if needed tomorrow, I really do hope he's allowed to race, because it would be fantastic to see him nab the win on Sunday. When you consider the season he's had, particularly his form and bad luck towards the start, a win would definitely be well deserved. Having a look then at the rest of the qualifying result, Lewis Hamilton will be starting alongside his teammate on the front row, Mercedes demonstrating some ominous pace. Sebastian Vettel ended up in third place, half a second off the pace of Valtteri Bottas, and Kimi Raikkonen sits fourth, 8.5 tenths off the pace of Bottas. A huge surprise. Kevin Magnussen, brilliant qualifying from him. He will be starting in 5th position with Esteban Ocon just behind. Charles Leclerc at one point in the session looked on for 5th place, but he'll be very happy, I'm sure, with P7. Sergio Perez in a second Force India in 8th place, just showing once again that team have got some pace, as are Haas with Grosjean joining his teammate in the top 10. He's going to start 9th, and Marcus Ericsson, he will be starting 10th for tomorrow's race. Q2 was a little bit farcical. Neither the Red Bulls, the Toro Rosso of Pierre Gasly, or the Renaults went out to set any times. And although the order is Verstappen, Ricciardo, Gasly, Sainz and Hülkenberg, that will change drastically, as you'll see a little bit later on, come the start of tomorrow's race. Brendan Hartley was knocked out in Q1. He ended up 16th, but of course, with the penalties for those ahead of him, he will be promoted further up the grid. Fernando Alonso was also knocked out in Q1. He qualified in 17th place, will take penalties, and so starts 16th tomorrow. Yeah. Sergei Sorokin 18th for Williams, with Stoffel Van Dorn in 19th for McLaren, and Lance Stroll qualified 20th, but as with many of those ahead of him, he will be promoted up the grid tomorrow. In terms of the strategy for the race, as you saw there, both the Mercedes drivers and the Ferraris made it through Q2 on the ultra softs, and so we'll obviously be starting the race on the purple marked tyres. The rest of the top 10 will be on the hypersofts, so Bottas, Hamilton, Vettel and Raikkonen should be running a fair few laps longer than those behind. What that does also mean is that, drama or safety cars aside, it will be a one-stop race for the leaders, or at least it should be. For those interested in how the tyres fared during practice, Kevin Magnussen managed the most laps on the hypersofts, completing 22. Lance Stroll did 27 laps on the ultra softs, and Sergei Sorokin completed 26 on the softs. However, it is expected that the soft tyres can pretty much run as long as the teams want them to. It is also worth remembering that the race is much later in the year this time round, and so the track conditions will be very different to what we saw last season. And also another thing to note, Sebastian Vettel appeared to be suffering with blistering quite badly on those hypersoft tyres during FP3 this morning. So for those that are going to be running them, they could degrade very quickly. But what do you think will happen in terms of strategy tomorrow? The leaders will likely be ultra softs to softs, with those starting on the hyper softs probably going to head straight to the softs as well. But will anybody try a two-stopper? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Some reaction now then from Valtteri Bottas, who was understandably very happy with the lap that has seen him land pole position. And after the session, the Finn said, "Yeah, it was a nice lap. In the end, I managed to improve a little bit, but yeah, it feels good. Still a little bit of the shakes. It takes a lot of concentration, but it's good. I am really happy for sure, but it is only the first step in this weekend. Massively long run from the start line to turn 1, so it is going to be important to try and keep that position." But sticking with Mercedes, and a bit of reaction as well from Toto Wolff after the qualifying session had finished, the Mercedes boss was asked by Sky Sports whether or not the team would be looking to use team orders in a bid to assist Lewis Hamilton in the race tomorrow, to which Wolff said, "It's going to be difficult to tell him that now after putting it on pole position, but we will have the conversation on Sunday morning and see how the race is going to pan out. Valtteri needed to gain some confidence, and that was just what the doctor ordered. He knows he has to extract everything to beat Lewis." And Lewis Hamilton said that the error in Q3 that saw him abort his final run was down to, quote, slacking in the middle sector. And as replay showed, the championship leader overshot turn 7, ran well wide, and that forced him to abort his final run. That all leads us on nicely to Ferrari then. A lot of people felt like the Scuderia were the team to beat this weekend, but they are nowhere, at least on one lap pace. As I said when running down the result, Vettel half a second off, Raikkonen 8/10 off. That is a huge gap, a real surprise. I mean, their race pace did look closer to Mercedes yesterday, but they've definitely got a lot of catching up to do. And I would sit here and say, this weekend is crucial for Vettel and they've got to help him turn it around if they want to keep him in this title fight. But quite frankly, the last 2 have been must-win races. However, despite the gap in qualifying that Sebastian Vettel labelled a surprise, the German is still hopeful of being able to fight for victory on Sunday. He stated, "I just spoke to Valtteri and reminded him what happened last year, so maybe we can turn it around. It would be nice, it depends on the start, the initial jump, and then you know where you are, and we'll see what we can do for the first corner. But after that, it's a long race, so tricky one, but for sure, if there's a gap, we'll go for it. It was important to get as close as possible to them, but it's true they've been very quick, so we'll see tomorrow. It's a long race. We've seen the tyres are very important. Today, I think it should have been a bit closer, but not enough to be a threat. I had a tiny mistake in the last sector, but I knew I had to improve by half a second." So that's what Sebastian Vettel had to say after the session finished. And look, as I've already touched on, and as Bottas and Vettel have both said there, Ferrari locked out the front row last season. Bottas started P3. The thing got a great toe down the long straight at the start and was leading by the time they got to that first braking point. So yes, Mercedes looked very dominant in qualifying, but it isn't necessarily over. But as I've already touched on, Ferrari have got a lot of work to do if they want to rescue this weekend. Before I get on to my one to watch for tomorrow, there is just something I want to mention. So the second qualifying session then, and it was a frustrating and disappointing one. As I've already said, neither of the Red Bulls, Pierre Gasly or the Renaults went out to set a time, and that is frustrating for the fans. But although it limits the track action for them, it does make sense, as Red Bull and Gasly in particular will be taking penalties and are going to start from the back of the grid anyway, so why waste the mileage? But if that's the case, perhaps not going out and setting times in Q1 would be fairer so that we at least get a decent shootout to make it into the top 10. Unfortunately though, with the penalty system the way it is, we will always have to sacrifice, if you like, a session, because the teams aren't always going to see the point in running cars if they end up at the back of the grid anyway. So even if they don't run in Q1, we're going to lose that session and the excitement of getting drivers through to Q2, and if they do run in Q2, then we get the reverse and we see what happened today. But as for Renault, again, it does make sense. They probably didn't have the pace to make it through to Q3, and so why waste the mileage if you're starting 11th and 12th anyway? But this is the point I'm kind of trying to make. Had Red Bull and Gasly not gone out in qualifying, Renault would have almost been forced into having to run, thus giving us a half-decent session. But again though, with the rules around the penalties the way they are, we as fans just kind of have to grin and bear it, unfortunately. It doesn't mean we have to like it, of course, or can't complain when it happens, but there's not really a lot else we can do. As I've already said, from a fan perspective it's disappointing, but from a team and strategy perspective, it makes complete and total sense. At this point, I'd usually give you my one to watch, but today I'm not going to give you one to watch because I just can't separate them. So instead, let's have a look at my team to watch for tomorrow. Yes, it's Red Bull. Both drivers are starting right at the back of the grid and easily have the third fastest car this weekend. Actually, based on the pace they've shown during practice, they could be right on the pace of the Ferrari, so they should be able to make their way through the field, which means, unlike last year, we should get a ton of overtaking. And to be honest, I'd be surprised if they don't end up P5 and P6 come the checkered flag tomorrow. But if we get a safety car and they can time the strategies to perfection, as they did of course in China, maybe, just maybe, and it is an outside chance and they will need some luck, they could be knocking on the doors of a podium. Again, big maybe. It is also worth noting that Pierre Gasly has shown solid pace as well in Russia, and he's another one that therefore is technically out of position too, so perhaps keep an eye on him as well. But that is it then for the Russian Grand Prix qualifying report, and now we know how the grid will be lining up tomorrow. Who do you think will take the Grand Prix victory? What is your podium? And which driver or drivers will you be keeping a close eye on tomorrow? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Now, provided my computer plays ball, I will be back tomorrow at 11:40 AM UK time for the race watch along. And if you don't fancy that, don't forget to join me, Jonty and Chamber for the post-race stream. In the meantime, though, you can follow me on social media. Links to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and to Discord are all in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.